Welcome back to the Win More, Live Better podcast. And today we're going to stick around within the realm of volleyball. And I'm really excited to bring you Josh Steinbach as our guest today. He is the head volleyball coach at the University of Villanova. And so I'm really his name has been brought up through a couple of different people that I've had on the show in different circles. I promise all good things. Okay. We'll
Yeah,
save
I'm
some of the
already I'm
other.
already questioning Zach. I'm already worried. Yeah.
Yeah,
So, but
we'll save some of the things that I'm like, I think this should have been kept private offline, you know? But in the meantime, more than anything, just so many in the profession and some of your peers speak so highly of you, not only as a coach, but also as a human being and as a person and what you've helped build there at Villanova, but also some of the other stops you've had along the way. So more than anything, I was just really excited to create space for you, Josh, to share with the audience today some of your coaching journey and kind of peel back the curtain a bit on who you are as a coach. So thank
great.
you.
Well, yeah, Zach, thanks for having me on. Pleasure to be here. And yeah, so it's I like doing this stuff and getting out and talking a little bit. If you've had somebody that said nice things about me, I must have paid them well at some point in time, and I'll have to go back and give some credit later on. But thank you very
Uh,
much.
yeah, I love it. I love it. When you looking at your coaching background now, it expands, just over a couple of decades in terms of, and with a lot of experiences, a lot of things that I can imagine you've learned, and I'd also imagine too that that early version of you as a coach probably has some overlap, some similarity to who you are now, but I'd also imagine there has also been an evolution and a lot of growth within that. I
Yeah.
want to kind of start there. When you think about kind of the early version of you as a coach versus now, what are some of the things that have maybe changed and or evolved the most in your coaching and in your leadership?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think it's one of the interesting things that happens to us as people as we get older, and whether it's in your profession or just in your life, is you start to learn how much you don't know the longer you do it, and there's that phrase about youth being wasted on the young, and it's having the ability to look back and learn from experience and go, oh, I thought I was so sure of this one thing was the absolute way to do things, and I was so positive of that, and then realizing that that's not if things are more malleable than that, and so I think for sure when I took this job at Villanova, certainly in my time coaching before I arrived here, I was pretty convinced that there was a much more black and white, right and wrong way to do things, and that I knew what the right way was, and everybody else was I don't know what they're doing. It's not. Yeah. And I think over time, I think what I've learned is that how we deal with people, how we deal with our players, our staff, and is the stuff that we need to make sure we have right, and then the volleyball stuff, the X's and the O's, the training techniques. They're gonna, they're important, but those are the things that we can experiment with and play around with and figure out what works for different groups and different players and different people. Whereas the relational part is the stuff that matters the most, and we've got to make sure we have that part right. So I think, whereas back then I would have just said, well, hey, we're just going to take care of the volley and everything else is, and so it just those things shift over time, and certainly I was very sure of myself when I took this job here in 2007. I wouldn't let anybody else do anything in the gym. I was totally in control of every drill, every whatever the start times. I mapped it all out. I wanted to plan everything, and um, I think the more confident I have in what I'm doing coaching, the less I have been demanding of that kind of control, and been very confident in just having assistants develop and learn how to do those things, and just working with them. And so there's so many things have changed. It's Zach. It's a really fun question because I could talk for a long time on all the things that I did different back then that I wish I knew more of now. But I think um, I think I know that I don't know as much, which is the biggest thing.
I want to press on the comment you made about the control thing because that's certainly come up, I think, in other conversations that I've had in on the show, and I think those that in the mental game kind of sports psychology realm and coaching realm, one of the very popular adages is that it's about controlling what you can control, but there's oftentimes a secondary part to that that gets forgotten, which is yes, it's control what you can control, but it's also can you let go of or surrender what you can't
Mm,
control. So
yeah.
I'm interested for you, what was a tipping point, or what did it take for you to kind of slowly start to maybe relinquish some of that control as a coach?
Well, I would like to say it was a slow journey, but I hired a young assistant coach here by the name of Amy Pauley, um, who is, if you've never met Amy, Amy's now coaching the pro league with the Orlando Valkyries and won a championship last year and is just she's a force of nature in the way she comes in as a big personality and a presence and I just gained confidence in her very quickly, and I started to let her take care of some things, and all of a sudden when you watch somebody else do something and they have success with it, you go, oh, okay, this is okay, and so I don't think that was not a slow learning situation for me. It was all of a sudden I had this person here who came in and started just taking hands on doing stuff, and it's like, no, Josh, I got this. No, I've got this, and she was really good at it. And what I think I realized is that, and that was in the gym, right? And so what I think I realized is control that I'd given up in some things, like recruiting. Like, I mean, I've had, I've been really lucky in how I've been able to hire, and I had people early in my career that were very, very good at, and some things, Julie Darty, who's now the head coach of Mississippi State, Kate Wolfenden before her, who's now in, she's in not in college coaching any longer, but she was those guys. Those three assistants specifically were really, really good at some relationship stuff, some recruiting stuff, some training things. And when you can allow yourself to let those good people do their jobs and be good at their things, it makes you start to learn that, whether it's on purpose or by accident. And so I think um, Amy came in and all of a sudden she was just making, she was making things happen and doing things and things that I was like, I didn't ask for that, or I didn't want this, and like, yeah, but you need it, and here's what we're doing, and so that really kind of taught me quickly, in a way that I didn't expect, that hey, it's okay to let these people do some things, and it's okay to let them fail at some things too, and hey, you're gonna go ahead and yeah, you want to try this, go do this, and the unfortunate thing is I wish I would have learned that a long time ago, because when I was a young volunteer assistant with at Penn State, Russ would I'd say, hey, we should do this, and he'd be like, yeah, go ahead, and he would he was so comfortable with it, he would let he gave me opportunities to do some things that I never thought somebody like that would give me that kind of opportunity, and and I should have learned that lesson from him then. Instead, I had to like experience it myself, like so many other lessons in life, right? You gotta do it before you learn the lesson.
People have shared with me that there are some things in life that are better experienced than explained, or
Yeah,
like that it require like you have to go through it, like you mentioned, and it's like
yeah,
it's I can't tell you how many times there's probably been a moment where I've come to the realization of something and finally feel like, okay, I got it. And someone's been like, Zach, I've been telling you this for months or years or whatever. I'm just maybe a good
yeah,
bad listener, slow learner or what. But to some of that is what you're describing too, is it gets to a point where you do kind of have to also experience it. The other thing that I think you're in essence in some ways describing was actually something that came up in my conversation with JJ Van Neal, who I know you're obviously very close with. And one of the things that he touched on that I thought was great was, given his background getting into coaching, his lens at which he sees leading and management and so forth is a little unique compared to some. And one of the things he talked about was how important hiring is, how important it is to get the right people on the bus and in the right seats. And I think that's kind of one of the things I hear and you describe, not only with Amy, but maybe with some others, of just part
yeah.
of what can help there is who you bring in and surround yourself with.
Well, and I think you're very right, and um I listened to that interview, so I know that one, and JJ, I was in on some of those conversations with some of his hires, and I think the difference. there's differences in everybody's situation, and you know, um, early on in my career here, our salary pool was so small, it was laughable. And so I was hiring some people with very little experience or none. And so I thought I just had to take control over things. But the truth was, I was getting people who were willing to take those salaries. That meant that they were very passionate about what they were doing and were really driven. And what it turns out is that, you know, different motivating factors can put people in different positions. And so, when you are willing to do something for very little money and that's not what you're, in it for, and get in and stay. And, um, Amy was here for 6 years and was never a full-time assistant here, and but was amazing and did such a good job. And I think, it was easy for me to give somebody like that control and let it go. And so you're right. I think I've been really fortunate in hiring. I think one of the things that we've done well is we've given up control to some of those young assistants who are very hungry and are out doing it. And I've just been able to help guide them a little bit. And so it makes their learning curve, steeper, and they learn those things faster, and they're getting into it quicker because we're saying, hey, listen, I've got a guy now, Joe, and he comes in, like, I don't run the gym. He runs the gym. I tell him the things I want to have done, and they get done. And if they're not, then we have other side conversations. We're like, hey, I said I wanted to, we just have a regular conversation about it. He's outstanding. And I think, he's gonna be a really good head coach when he gets the opportunity. And, that's what happens is we get assistants, and then we're giving them opportunities and trying to teach them along the way and help them get better at the things they're doing. So I think you're right. It's twofold. It's, hey, can we hire good people so start the right people to hang out with, and be able to have conversations with and learn with, and then and challenge me too. Like, I'm not trying to hire people who just say, yes, you're right, coach, and let's go. And then you want people that you can teach and that are going to be willing to learn, and going to be, want their ideas challenged a little bit. And this whole thing we do, this crazy profession is, if you're not learning in it, then you're missing, because it'll pass you by quickly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it's I had somebody tell me once, they were like, if you really think back to like how many people learn how to become a leader, and this was in a much broader sense, not just in sport, they were like, you generally learn how to lead by having opportunities to lead. Like you have to actually do it. Like you can't just read a bunch of leadership books and think that that will make you a better leader. Obviously, there's a lot more to it. So I think on one hand, I hear you describe how powerful and valuable that is for them to have those opportunities extended to them to take on more responsibility, and for you
Yep.
to, in essence, demonstrate, hey, how much you believe in them. But then also with that too, it's like you mentioned, given maybe some of the constraints, hey, maybe there's certain things that we're not afforded to be able to go out and get, or to offer for certain people, but there are certain things that we are looking for in this person to ensure that they then come and
Yeah.
they do this job at a high level, right? And some of that's the character, some of that's the desire to learn and curiosity and all of that in between.
Yeah. And first off, let me clarify that those things have changed over time. We're in a much better position with how we're able to support our assistants now, which is great. And so I can be a little more diligent in hiring processes, and I think they've gone really well over the past few years. But I do think that, in those early days here, it was because I was what we the afford, like, the constraint was you don't have this much salary. So, but the side bonus of, you don't think about it, is you get people who really want to do it. And so it became very easy for me to hand off responsibilities. And I think, and that's proven out as people who have learned well in the program early on and been able to do a lot. So yeah, and that's that's the way I want to have learned it, and just been able to do it. And I was fortunate when I was an assistant coach. I worked in a couple programs that, um, very different, two different programs before I got to Villanova, very differently had to do, you know, um, a lot of different things. So, I was able to run the gym for a year or so in one program, and then the other one I was in charge of all the recruiting and budgeting and travel and all these other things. And so, you learn those things because you're doing them, and that really prepped me for what I'm doing, here when I got this job.
Maybe if we kind of go there for a moment, obviously there's some richness with kind of some of these early experiences in coaching that have shaped who you've become today. And again, I'm as I've heard you describe in other forms, that there's certainly a lot that you've taken from those arenas and through some of those people that you've had as mentors and guides. And also along the way too, it's sometimes it's figuring out like, okay, what are the things that are, maybe more authentic to you, and how do you also now lead in a way that's more aligned with your own values and things like that that may have similarity, but again, also could be differences. When you think back to some of those earlier experiences, what are some of the things that you've adapted and you've pulled from that continue to now show up in how you try to lead or build the culture? But also then what are some things that are that you quickly discovered early on, like, okay, I need to actually make this my own and put my own fingerprint on it?
Yeah. Um, Good question. I think, I think the learn being able to do things on your own and learn how to communicate in your own style is really, really important. And I think, I was, like I said, I got to work with Russ Rose for a while. I worked before that. I was at a high school program in La Jolla, California, the Bishop School, where I was a JV and an assistant varsity coach for Todd Maddox, who is a brilliant coach who's and so I got to learn from those two early on, and then I worked for Reed Sunahara and Trina Smith in some programs, and everybody had a different style of communication and the way they went about it. And I think learning that there are different ways to do those things was really important for me. Just how you talk to student athletes and or coworkers or whomever, and how you manage those people, I think is really important. And I think all those people had a really good way about how they dealt with some people around them, and I hopefully grocery store shopped all their good qualities, right? Like I just um yeah, I mean, like, you know they just all had some very genuinely lovely qualities about them as far as how they talked to people and how they dealt with the people around them. And some of them, they were very, very clear and direct, and they were able to do that in a very effective manner. Some as they had, they were able to make people how they made people feel. They, like they were great with eye contact and good with just how they spoke to you. And so I think that the first thing that jumps out is all those people I got to work with as an assistant were really, really good at those things. I'm sure I left out some people as well, but I think that that piece. I remember I was an assistant for a couple of years at San Diego Mesa College, in the junior college where I played, and Kurt Donaldson was my head coach. And one of the other people that I worked there with was a guy named Ojan Baranbegi. And Ojan one day said to me, he's like, Kurt communicates like he's like your beach partner. Like, come on, man, let's get this thing together. And that was true. That's how Kurt kind of coached, like, because he was this beach guy that grew up playing doubles all the time and was a great beach player. But when he got into coaching, I think that's kind of he adapted that style. And then he's like, hey, Todd communicates like a teacher. Like that's what he is. He's he's an English teacher, and he'll be like, hey, we practice this, we study this. Here's the things we do. And it was very interesting how Oj described these people's styles. And I think I thought about how everybody communicates from an early stage in my career. I think that's something that I've tried to be good at, and I'm still not there yet. I think that's something that we always want to get better at. I mean, I had finished up my individual meetings for the end of the semester, and there's one meeting I just gaffed, and I texted. It's like, hey, can we do that again? We didn't hit all the right points. So I don't think we got each other very well. We didn't connect, and so we just we have to admit failure sometimes and start over and do it again. So that communication piece is something that I really have honed in on. And as far as things that are on my own, is like I'm never going to be a disciplinarian, and it's just not what I'm good at, and I don't ever want to be that. I don't have that feel in my gym, and so this program's a cooperative, and if my captains come in and tell me something in here, we're gonna listen, and we're gonna give them credit for knowing the program as well and having as much at stake that I do. And so I'm not a dictator in this program at all. I have more say than maybe everybody else, but I don't. No, I don't want it to feel that way. I'm trying to make my program one where I run too loose a ship instead of too tight a ship because I think the benefits of that are the cost benefit for me is better when the ship is a little bit loose than when it's too tight. I don't want everybody feeling like they can't tell me what's going on or need if they need help with something that we're missing it. And so there's some there's some problems with that as well. But that's kind of how we've decided to run it. And I've been in some places where that wasn't the case. Everything was pretty to the point and directed. And so that's okay. That's everybody's gonna have their own style and things.
That kind of ties in that I think, on one hand, what you're describing is like, okay, how do you continue to grow and learn and develop, in this instance, as a communicator at an individual level and how important that is. But then there's also this environment that you shape and that you create daily for those that you lead. And those again, there is certainly no singular way to do that. And there are many coaches and examples of people that have done it in very different ways and
Yep.
been, in essence, very successful, as you're describing. When you think about that environment, like if you were to go a little bit further, like when you think about the environment that you're trying to create for those that you're leading, how, in essence, do you want them to describe it?
Yeah, I mean the goal. I mean, I listened to JJ's. I'm sure you talked about some core values at some point in time in that thing, and I'm sure that most programs have a listing of core values, right? And I think those things are all great, and we should have those. But I think for me, the guiding star is that when our players graduate here, when they're done, we have a senior athlete banquet week before graduation, and what I want to be able to have them say to me something along the lines of, Josh, that was great. I wish I could do that again, or I'm glad I came here. This was the right choice. And we're not going to hit it for everybody, but it encompasses so many things that we're trying to do. We're trying to create an environment that is competitive, where we're trying to win matches, and we're playing at a high level because they want they're competitors. They want that. We're trying to create an environment where everybody feels cared for and thought about, and no matter what your role is on the court, that you have a voice and you feel like you're being seen and you're not being ignored and you're just you're not a cog, right? And you're part of something that's bigger, and so those pieces are really important. Um, we want to make sure our athletes feel like that they're not just athletes, that they're student athletes, and that they have a social life, and that they've got a spiritual life, and they have all of these. There's all we contain multitudes, so there's like how do we bring those things out in the people who are around us, and we want to make sure that we allow them the freedom to do the things that they want to do while they're in college, a special time of life, and I want to make sure that they're not leaving here going that was freaking terrible. I can't believe I went there, and I think that's a challenge, but that's the for me that's the core value for me for how I run the program, and so um, I've lost what your question was, but the beginning, but I just started talking, so hopefully it worked out.
It did. No, no, no. I appreciate it. It's like, yes, like anyone could go the route of, hey, let me go define the core environment or culture that I want with values and things like that, and then reverse engineer to think about how do you bring them to life and so forth. On the same vein, though, like when you have a North Star like what you described, which is what you in essence want them to see or say and feel at the end of their time there. And hey, like I would love to go back. It makes a lot of things very downstream from that. Like if that is kind of the stuff, like that is going to certainly still shape. It's a different way to go about it, but I think it's still immensely valuable and it still very much then shapes that environment that you're trying to create on a regular basis for them.
And it's like um, and I don't know when that came into my consciousness here is that was the thing that we're trying to hit. I do remember associating it with um, when Good to Great came out and everybody was talking about a hedgehog concept and you have to have one thing to do and trying to boil down everything to like one thing. And I think so if you have something that you can just tie everything into, it makes it pretty easy and uh, not easy. It makes it pretty simple, and but it does, but certainly there's all kinds of things you have to be thinking about when you're thinking about hey how do I make this experience great for our student athletes and so yeah I'm that's kind of the thing that gets going. And I said like we don't get it. We don't get every athlete right. I mean, there's some kids that leave here that didn't have the experience they wanted, and sometimes that's on us, and sometimes it's just it's part of the circumstances. And so, but we're that doesn't mean we don't plug away and try and get it right for this next group. And for whatever reason, we have a group right now that I feel really good about, um, and things are going really well. So it's I feel comfortable talking about it all right now because we're in a good spot.
Yeah, yeah. I want to, kind of flip the mirror kind of back towards yourself for a moment. We talked a little bit about this environment, what you're trying to create for your players, but, one thing that I've appreciated in listening to some of previous conversations that you've had with others, you in essence describe this idea of like how difficult it can be at times to not lose yourself as a
Mm,
coach in this profession and try to how do you be the same person, irrespective of sometimes the results and outcomes. And again, talk about control things sometimes outside your control. I was interested to maybe have you talk a little bit more about what that means to you and maybe what you feel like the difference is like coaching from a space of joy as opposed to like almost like survival,
yeah.
and maybe how that's shown up for you.
Yeah. I think um I think I still really like what I do. And I've been here for this will be my 20th season come fall. And and I've been through some doozies. Like I've been through some seasons where we weren't very good and we didn't win a lot of matches. And I think everybody should go through that. I don't think it's fair to you to have to go through every season where it's just great all the time. You miss out on so much. And it's really hard. Winning solves a lot of problems, right? And so when you have to deal with all of this stuff and you're trying to figure out how to win a match, and man, it's easy to get wrapped up in too many things that don't matter. And so I, I think you have to, but like we talked about earlier, you have to live some of that stuff to figure it out. What I will say is I don't, if I get to a point in time where it is only a relief to win a match and not and doesn't bring me joy, and I don't say, hey, like that was awesome, like um and sometimes even when we lose matches, that was awesome, that was so much fun, right? Like um if I don't have that, then I'll have to find something else to do because I still really have that. And um you know it's interesting that when you said, how do you not lose yourself? I think you have. I don't know the answer to that. I really don't. But because I know that it's happened at times. But over the last 5 or 6 years, life's kicked me in the teeth a little bit, and somehow, staying kind of rooted in my job has really helped me through some of the things. And so it can be the opposite, right? The job can be going really hard, and life can keep you rooted in things. But because I get to be around young athletes who are excited about life and have this kind of like, whatever else, it's really helped me through some things when I've had really hard times going on outside of here. And then, so I think that's helped me a lot lately. I think when we've had bad seasons here, I've been fortunate enough to have really good friends to lean on and just talk to about it and say, hey, listen, this is what's going on. And I can call JJ, I can call Todd Maddox, I can call Russ, I can call I have all my friend Danny Scott out of Cal State San Bernardino. I get on the phone with my former assistants, and I have these people that I've been really really fortunate to call my friends and my coaching cadre. And so that's that's kind of the things that have kind of kept me together when things aren't good here. Yeah, I think that kind of hits the answers.
Yeah, it does. It does. I mean, again, like I think one thing that I appreciate oftentimes in these conversations is although most of it is obviously very much geared towards coaching and leadership and so forth, like you could replace a lot of it with parallel conversations that show up with players too. It's the same way with athletes where as much as we sometimes want to keep things separate, like what happens on the court versus what happens away from it, like those things can blend and like especially when things are maybe more chaotic or just you're going through something outside of volleyball. for many, like that it becomes a space of like stability. It becomes this space of groundedness. And like again, part of that too is because of who you're surrounded with. Like you're surrounded by people. Whereas like one of the things that oftentimes makes those things much harder is in isolation, trying to navigate them. So it sounds in many ways like it's no different for any of us as coaches or leaders.
No, you are right on, and I think early on this like I've referred to Todd a lot, but I mean one of his things was education through sport. I remember him having it in his as a high school coach, having it on his thing. And when I think about education through sports, through athletics, it's not even about like book learning. It's about life learning. It's about like all the things that come out of what we do. And as a coach, you know the act of just being a good listener is incredibly important, right? And if you're in a relationship, whether it's a friendship or a romantic relationship, and you can't listen, you're in big trouble. Like you're in big trouble. Like you're not going to do well. And so all these things parallel so well, and just how we go about this job, in is really applicable to so much of our life, or so much of our life is applicable to this job. And so those that's for me, that's a big part of why I love it so much.
Um, kind of to build a second, the word I guess that I kind of was emerging for me as I was thinking what you're describing is how valuable it can be at times in a way, especially when it's healthy, is like for you to like share your humanity as a like coaches are human beings too, athletes are
Yep.
human beings,
Yep.
right? And so, and I think of it too so often with coaching is it's like, hey, if we want our players to do or be X, then we also must have to be whatever. And so part of me, I guess where I'm thinking of going with this is like, given some of the things that you've had to endure and struggle, how important has that been along the way, or how has it been helpful for you to like for you to be human and for you to like kind of share some of that or to model some of that for your players along the way?
Well, it's a really Zach. Thank you for that. It's a really interesting question, and it's one that I'm battling with all the time. I think of the things I've been through here while I've been at Villanova. I went early on. I went through a divorce. When I was going through that, I was miserable and I was having a hard time with it. And one of my seniors came in and was like, "What is going, dude? What like was basically just calling me out, like, dude, what's going on with you?" And I just told her what's going on. She's like, "Well, will you tell the team so that everybody's not like knowing, like, wondering what the hell you're angry about all the time?" Like, and I didn't, you know, I didn't think that I should be sharing what's going on in my personal life with my team at that time. And um, and she just called me out on it and said, "Look, hey, we got to, like, let us know and we'll be okay. We'll move on and we'll you like, and you'll be like not holding on to this." And that made things better at that time. In the last 5 years, I've dealt with my partner going through cancer and not surviving it, and I had a cardiac arrest. I've had all these things happen, and so I maybe have overshared a little bit. And I think it's there's a line in there to draw. Sorry about that. And so you
Very
got to
good.
figure out those things as well, and what's where you share and where you're vulnerable. And but I do think it's important that if you're asking people to be vulnerable as they go through as athletes and with their teams and with each other, and that we can model those behaviors. And so um again, that's a line I'm willing to blur once in a while and be like, hey, this is what's going on with me right now. I'm just letting you know. And and through some of it, I wasn't always great, and I think that's a learning concept. And some of that was we like you stack things going through COVID and you're dealing with stuff at home and you've got all these things, and it's hard. It's a lot harder all of a sudden to relate to your team. And um, but I think for me, I've always felt comfortable just being like, hey, this is who I am. This is what I'm going through. This is what I'm dealing with. And I'm not asking for your sympathy or your whatever else. I'm just asking you to understand that I'm a human person too, and I'm not going to get everything right along the way. And I'm trying doing, I'm doing everything I can with the circumstances I'm going through are right now. Just like I'm going to ask you to go do your best with the circumstances you have. And we've had kids go through all kinds of things while they've been here. They've been sick and not messing around, sick, and we've had some kids, we've had who've lost parents and siblings, and um, all kinds of just really rough stuff. And life is going to get you. And during your 4 years of college, there's good odds that something's going to come up. And so we want to be there for you to be able to help and help you get through those things as best we can. And I hope that your teammates and your assistant coaches and myself can help through those things. But and it's interesting to whether how much to share, when to share. I don't know that I always get it right, but I tend to be an open book about those things more than being super private. So I don't know what's the right answer, or the best, or healthiest, or whatnot. But it's kind of how I've been, and it's true to me. So that's okay.
Like many things that I'm discovering in life, there's not a playbook for it.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
don't, to your point, I don't know exactly what's the right answer. And I think some days it can be one thing and some days it's something different. But
Right.
there's a few things in there though that I think are really powerful. And I think it also in some ways how nice it is to hear you describe too, like even now circumstances have shifted and things that, still again, still human, still navigating different challenges and so forth. But like even hearing you talk about earlier, the one-on-one that you have with this player and being open to be like, hey, like I think I kind of botched that, or like that didn't go exactly maybe in the way that it needed to, or was this helpful. Even just the acknowledgement of that, I think is can be immensely valuable as a way to not only model it, but to also like to strengthen trust. And I think where my mind kind of went back to, and this may not have been at all how you were conceptualizing it per se. Maybe this is my own spin, but like when you think about what you were saying, having your players conclude their time at Villanova thinking, I would love to do that again.
Yeah.
It would be very easy for that to be, to have that when like it's all highs and it's all joys and it's all like,
Mm,
but like,
mm, mm,
but the reality is that it's like some of the most significant and meaningful part of that will be going through hard times and having people around you to go through it with you.
yep.
And so now how how that has been for you, but also now how you are reciprocating that for your players, to me is that's actually really immensely valuable.
No, you're 100% right. I mean, it's easy. It's easy to just do it. Hey, we come in, we win a bunch of matches, we do this, we do this. Everybody's healthy. People are happy in their roles. We go like when everything fits nicely. Then there's not, it's not. It's simple. You don't have to work at it that hard. You don't have to spend mental energy thinking about how you're going to manage a situation. Um, when you're hit with challenges. I mean, even if they're volleyball challenges, right? Like, hey, all of a sudden we're not executing at this level. We've got a bunch of kids out sick, or like like those are like how do you manage those things? And then when they're big things, then you have we've had that are challenging. You got some mental health disorder kid on your team. You're not sure how to handle and how to manage her, and she knows it. She's having a tough time, and how can you help her get what she needs, and while staying true to the team? And like these things are all things that are really they're never easy, and so we want to make sure that we're trying to handle everybody with the best care we can, um, and like I said, and being honest with who I am and how I am, and doing it, and like you're right. I said I botched that meeting, and I know I did, and it's been on my mind. I haven't done well for 24 hours because I just was like, shoot, I got that right. And I think that those things happen a lot, and we just need to acknowledge we make mistakes, and too many people are just unwilling to admit mistakes ever, right? And I don't think that's good leadership. I think good great leadership is when people can sit there and go, hey, look, this is what I wanted to do, and this is what the plan was, and here's why we thought that, but it didn't go right. So we're gonna change course, adjust, and do these things. But here's why. And I've been fortunate enough to be around some administrators here and whatever else that are very capable of those things as well. And that's those are good things to see modeled.
Yeah, yeah. And then I think of it too, actually tying into, our conversations earlier about your staff and who you surround yourself with. And I mean, this ties in so well to them of like creating an environment where people have permission to not be perfect. For people to, like you mentioned, it's like, hey, like, okay, mistakes will happen. And it's also like we can still have high standards and we can still um, give permission for people to not be perfect along the way is in navigating that. But again, how do we model it? How do we reflect it and communicate it to me is kind of what I hear you describe. And then, you
For
you
sure.
kind of talked a little bit about some of the things that were helpful for you, people and so forth, over the years in helping you stay grounded. But I guess I'm also interested in with that player that you mentioned who came in and said, "Hey, what's going on here?"
Yeah.
Because I think I've had my own experiences with this. Like I've had instances where players have come up and said, like, "Hey, why are you all stressing out? Like, why are you all like?" They can sense it. We think we're fooling them. They like it doesn't work.
No,
Like
no,
they
no, yeah,
see
no.
right through it, and
They're
so
smart.
I've I've had my own chin checks with this in the past, and I guess I'm curious, like. Are there things that you feel like you've learned about what your players really need from you amidst these moments?
Hmm. Um, I think what you're asking is have I learned what different players need from me? I think I think that's a variable. I think it change, like different. The hardest part about any relationship dynamic is Zach, you and I could be friends, and there's some times when you just know you need to be left alone, even though things are tough, and you want to work things out for a minute, and then you come talk about it. And then some people, another, my other friend here needs to just get it out and go and talk, and so the hard part is to be able to adapt to what the people are in front of you are, and the people who, easy for me to say. The hard part is to adapt to what your current group of people is, and because you're with a team dynamic that changes every year, um, every semester a little bit, is that um, you've got to make sure your crowd a little bit, and I know this particular group has some really great strengths, and I can get in there and talk to them about pretty much whatever's going on, and they're going to be good. But there's some things that they're not interested in, and so we kind of like I have a good feel for this one, right? And I think sometimes you don't have that, and you miss, and you have to figure out, you have to learn a little bit about your group. Um, so I think that's what you're asking.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's great. As we kind of, bring it kind of towards the end, one of the things that I definitely wanted to ask a little bit about is I think there was a previous conversation that you used maybe within the last year or two that the term you used, this is kind of going back to like your development and growth as a leader.
Yep.
And I think you kind of mentioned like kind of going through this learning renaissance of
Oh
sorts,
yeah.
just like continuing to grow and whatnot. And so
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to build off of that a little bit of like, what are things right now that you're studying, you're exploring, and that you're
Yeah.
trying to maybe grow in intentionally as a
Well,
leader?
I think I think for a long time. I mean, this is coaching theory now, right? Like I used to be a very much a very kind of rigid single contact feedback based loops, and then we spent half to three quarters of practice through that kind of stuff, and then we'd get into play at the end a little bit and just play some straight games and would score manipulate a little bit and I've gotten a little bit into the CLA, the constraints led approach here, which has really been fun, and that has kind of just opened up some ways that I've thought about doing things in our gym that have been really really fun. And gosh, I don't know who I heard say it, but I think it was from Casey Kreider, but he said something along the lines of, instead of coming to the gym every day with all the answers to give the team, now we come to the gym with questions, and and we present those in the forms of games to play, and it is really cool. It's just like, so we're playing games through different styles of games now for three quarters of practice, probably, maybe even a little bit more, and that has been a real change in what we've done, and it's been super fun, and the kids are having such a good time in the gym, um and there's small sided games, right? So I don't, if for us, and just like doing some small groups or score manipulation or court manipulation, like we're just doing all kinds of things that are to try and change the dynamics a little bit and get some some random activities. So we're learning in different ways, and I'm watching a group of people that's really embraced it and had a good time with it. And so that coaching renaissance over the past 3 or 4 years, um, been kind of slowly building, um, and I've got this good group of people to talk to about what we're doing in coaching. 3 or 4 people I'm on the phone with all the time, and sharing practice with, and watching, and getting out and watching some other people do some things, and it's been really fun. And so anytime we can learn new stuff and start doing things, and we feel good about it to do it a different way is exciting times of life, no matter what the thing is.
Yeah. I love the distinction. Yeah. I mean, for so long, it's like, yeah, how do coaching is generally showing up with the answers, but then, like you mentioned, shifting that to questions. I've also heard, people, particularly as they talk through CLA and whatnot, of, showing up with, like it's like creating a practice where it's like almost like a puzzle to solve or problem,
Yep.
through
Yep.
problem solving, right? And I think the same vein, it's when you ask those questions. I think what's nice about that too, in many ways, is, and I don't know if this is your experience at all, in your sport and at your level and so forth, but part of it too is how often I have to remind myself that many of the athletes that I've worked with, like in many instances, they know answers. Like they actually have nowadays too, like their acumen for the game and everything because of the resources and access and sheer amount of time that they're putting into it. Like they're coming into it oftentimes with a pretty deep reservoir of expertise already
Yeah.
per se, where they know it. The and part of your job sometime is to be the reminder for them, to be the person or to ask them the question that invites them to think about it in a way that maybe they haven't before. And that to me has become it's become a fun shift in many ways. And it also removes some of the pressure of you thinking like you have to be the one to have all the answers.
No, now I just ask questions. Hey, how'd that feel? Yeah, what did you see there? What did you like? You want to try that one again, or like, and they're smart kids, so they have good answers, and they're like, let's remember to tag that one on film and watch that one and see what we think again later. And so it started actually when I started, you know thinking. I didn't know anything about flip the classroom, but the idea of flipping the classroom was a really interesting idea. It was just like sending them things to watch on video, and they're like, okay, let's do this in practice now. And so I started kind of with a little bit of that stuff, and then started learning more about CLA, and it just kind of all integrates really nicely. And it goes back to stuff that old stuff. Like, I mean, the inner game of tennis is you know just such a good one. And our freshmen all read it before they come in, and have for a number of years. And I just think all these things just integrate so well, and are all about kind of the same thing. Hey, how are we learning? How are we um, going about solving those problems? And you're exactly right. It's a puzzle to solve, and isn't every match a different puzzle? And it certainly is, and that's why coaching and playing sports is so exciting all the time. Because it's an incredibly stimulating event to have go on. It hits all the brain centers.
Yeah. I said that earlier and like my mind immediately went to like who has told me that? Like there's and you may know Billy Allen. He has the
Yeah,
Coach
yeah,
Your Brains,
yeah.
right? Like I'm
And that
pretty sure
and
I
and
heard it from
actually
him.
that might be where that came from. So I think it
Okay,
might have
yeah,
been the Billy Allen interview with Casey Kreider, and those guys really
cool.
got into all that stuff. So that sounds right. I don't know those guys. I mean,
Uh-huh.
I've never had interaction with them, but I do listen to the podcast pretty regularly.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome. Yeah, no, I was sitting there going through, I'm like, I've heard this phrase. Who did I heard? Oh, Billy. Like Billy's and literally I
Yeah.
think we titled the episode. It was like learning is a puzzle or something like that. Or and so um I love that. My last thread that I kind of wanted to go off of it kind of continues in the form of learning in a sense, but maybe in a different way because I think one thing you discover is how sometimes the best way to learn is to teach, is to share
Yeah.
and, hearing you talk about the importance of surrounding yourself with peers. And I've also heard you talk about how important it has been to be a mentor to other coaches. And so I'd love to kind of just hear you describe kind of why that has been so important or meaningful for you. And my part two is like, are there things that you've learned about yourself through the mentorship of others as well?
Um. Yeah. The last part's that's a really good question. Let me come back to that. I think the mentorship is one of the most enjoyable pieces of what you get to do, right? Like when my former people or friends that are coaches call me and ask me questions, like, hey, how have you handled this, or what have you like? Um, Julia. When I got the opportunity to talk to Julia at Mississippi State, I don't know when it was. She was going through a little bit of a patch, and she just called me. We just talked for a while, and I got off the phone. It's like, oh, it's just like for whatever reason, that's the stuff that pulls on heartstrings when you can try and help somebody else through something that's going bumpy here. Um, and um, and she's great at her job on her own. She doesn't need me, but when somebody reaches out like that, it feels really good. And so I think the pieces of mentorship are number one. It's fulfilling. It's like one of those things where you're like, and I don't know if that's a natural human instinct to try and pass on knowledge or whatever else, but it certainly feels good. And from a learning standpoint, I think I was thinking about some doctor show from way back in the day, and I think it was about surgeons, and it was like I forget what the phrase was. It was like read one, watch one, do one, and it was about how you should, for procedures, right? It was like, hey, read about it, watch one, and then do one, or something like that. And that's not right, but it was in that vein of like, hey, you just let's, and that's the, or maybe it was watch one, do one, teach one, or something like that. I don't remember exactly, but it reminds me that like all those phases are really important parts of the learning process. Not just the learning how to do it, but then also the moving on of the knowledge, right? And so um, sometimes when somebody calls you and asks you a question, if it's a volleyball question, if it's a life question, if it's a whatever recruiting, whatever the thing is, that you all of a sudden are passing on a lesson that maybe you've forgotten, and you remember because somebody's asked you this question, and it never fails that the timing of those things happening are relevant, right? So somebody calls you with this problem, and then in the next, I don't know how long, something happens. Like, I'm glad that person called and gave me that thing because I got to remember that lesson too, and I need it from me. And so I would say that that's probably what comes out of that most often that I can think of, and why some of that mentorship stuff is really good learning.
I love that. I empathize with that very much so. I've found that, conversations of sorts, to your point, with others have certainly drawn or, or brought to the surface those things. And like, reading books sometimes, like I was just telling somebody the other day, it's like you read something or you listen to somebody talk about something and, then it almost like inevitably shows up in real life. Like you don't even have to force it oftentimes. Like it
Nope,
just
nope.
reveals itself.
Yep, those things just pop up amazingly. It's life is funny that way, huh?
Yeah, yeah. And then my very last question is one that I pose to every guest.
Sure.
Is what's something, Josh, that you're proud of that maybe you don't always get an excuse to talk about?
Oh wow. Something I'm proud of that I don't. I mean, yeah. Um, well, my brain went to two spaces right away, and so like I don't I in this job I talk about my job a lot, right? So, but hey, I've got two adult sons that are really cool guys that I like to hang out with, and you know, being a parent has been a huge part of my life for 27 years now, and that's probably the thing that I struggle with most in claiming credit for instead of just taking blame for, right? And so, but I really am, I think, at my core, proud of the job I've done with my boys, and my 27-year-old called me to talk through some finances recently, and I was like, oh, okay, we're in big boy territory now. This is cool. And so I think that would be one. Um, and then it doesn't always happen, but and we never get to talk about the kids that don't impact wins and losses with on court performance very often. But um, I mean, this happened to me yesterday, and it's happened a couple times in my career where I felt really good about it. And this kid in a meeting yesterday said, and she's a rising senior who has played really, really very little over her career. And I'm sure based on what we thought when she was coming in, she's disappointed in that, and rightfully so. And she's, just not really. But what she said was, she felt like she had this past academic year had her best year of playing volleyball ever, and it was so much fun, and she was just having a great time and really appreciated what was going on here, and is really looking forward to her senior year in whatever role that might be. And that just is the coolest thing ever. And it happens sometimes. You're doing something right when you've got a kid who's not playing very much and doesn't have a role that they might like, but is still having experience you're hoping that they'll have.
I think in the spirit of what you described again earlier, as that again, North Star, just trying to create this environment where people would love to do it again. I think that's a really nice kind of fitting example per se. And again, I think the thing too that I've appreciated is we all can have our North Star, we can all have our values and things like that. And that doesn't certainly mean that we will be perfect along the way. So I'm appreciative of you being vulnerable and sharing some of the things that have, hey, we're trying to figure it out, we're seeing what works, but we're also willing to acknowledge where we've had mishaps or mistakes and how we're also still growing throughout the process. So I appreciate you, Josh, just kind of peeling back the curtain a bit on you as a leader and as a coach, and also like kind of the broad range of different spaces that we were able to kind of dive into and speak to. So I just want to thank you first and foremost for your time.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It was a fun conversation, and it's stuff I really enjoy talking about. So I appreciate you having me on, and love the podcast, and looking forward to hearing some of your new stuff.